Chapter 10. My first TV appearance. Up to now, I had played and sung to small audiences, to students in the lounge at school, and to customers at Deacon's Perch. But singing on the Johnny Carson show would mean that millions of people would hear me. A dream was on the edge of reality. It was like moving from the Little League into Big League Baseball. I was very nervous. When I was standing in the wings, awaiting my turn to go on stage, my throat felt so tight that I didn't think I would be able to sing a note. I was sure that when I opened my mouth, no sound would come out. Then I remembered Patty, and I thought, I will sing especially for her. I won't think of the millions of people watching television. I will think only of one person whom I love very much, and I will sing only to her. My throat relaxed. Just at that moment, a man came to the dressing room and asked, "Are you ready, Mr. Sullivan? You're on stage in 3 minutes." Those seemed like the longest 3 minutes of my life. I was led to the stage, and I heard Mr. Carson saying to the audience, "I want you to give a big welcome to a young new artist, Tom Sullivan. This is an important night because I believe that Tom is going to be a star." Mr. Carson did not say anything about my being blind, and I don't believe that anyone in the audience at first realized that I could not see. I don't think they knew until I had sung my song and Mr. Carson came to me and linked his arm through mine. He guided me to a seat beside him. We talked mostly about golf, which Mr. Carson enjoys playing. I accepted his invitation to play with him, but said I wasn't quite ready to take him on at tennis. Everyone laughed. Mr. Carson has a way of putting people at ease, which is one of the reasons he is such a successful host and entertainer. What I didn't expect was the large number of messages of congratulations I received. I was beginning to realize that I really could step into the big league of the entertainment world. Following that appearance, several of the major record companies invited me to make an album. The days were very full for me. When I wasn't recording, I was entertaining at clubs or studying psychology. But there was still an emptiness in my life which followed me around. I longed to be with Patty again. We were separated by several thousand miles, and although we talked quite often on the telephone, it was not the same as being together. Sometimes when I was very lonely and missing Patty, I would ask Jack Shula to take me skydiving. The excitement of skydiving helped me take my mind off my loneliness. But skydiving took its toll. I often made bumpy landings, and this may have been one of the reasons that I developed glaucoma in my eyes. With sighted people, glaucoma is considered a serious disease because it can lead to blindness. For me, the seriousness was that I suffered severe headaches. One very cold night, I was working in my dormitory room when my head began to hurt so badly that I thought it was going to explode. I took some aspirin, but they didn't help at all. I had to get medication which was stronger than aspirin from the Harvard Infirmary, so I made my way out of the dorm and into the freezing weather outside. The snow muffled all sound. Snow is a blind man's fog. I thought I was walking across Harvard Square when I suddenly slipped on a sheet of ice. I was dazed and had no idea where I was. The pain in my head throbbed, and I just lay there in the snow. I didn't want to move. I don't like to think what might have happened if another student had not walked across the square at that time. But someone must have been looking after me, for I heard a voice above me saying, "Are you okay? Can I help?" The student helped me to my feet and, discovering that I was blind, led me to the infirmary. There a doctor gave me a pain-killing shot, and I was taken to Massachusetts General Hospital. An ophthalmologist told me that the only way I could get rid of the headaches was to have my eyes surgically removed and replaced with artificial ones. That may sound like a horrible thing to have happened, but for me it didn't matter. Mine had never been of any use to me. Besides, this way I could choose whatever color eyes I wanted, and even change them when I wished. Actually, I asked for brown eyes because brown was the natural color of my eyes. The doctor promised me that my plastic eyes would look much better than my real ones. The operation was successful. The headaches disappeared, and I was grateful for that. But no doctor could heal the pain in my heart, the pain caused by my longing to be with Patty. I had definitely decided that I wanted to marry her, but I was tortured by the thought that it might not be right for the girl I loved to have a blind husband. All the time I felt that I had to prove that I could hold down a good job, or at least earn enough money to support her and give her a nice home. One day I had been worrying about my future so much that I asked Jack Shula to take me skydiving. Skydiving always seemed to clear my head and help me forget my worries. When we reached the flying club, the pilot of the plane shook his head. "The wind is too gusty. It wouldn't be safe for you to jump today," he said. I protested that Jack and I had traveled a long way and explained that I was an experienced skydiver. The pilot was still not too keen on it, but reluctantly agreed to take me up. At about 6,500 feet, the little plane was tossing about in the gusty wind. The pilot suddenly said, "Okay, Tom, 1, 2, 3, jump!" Once again I thrilled to the feeling of complete abandon as I dived into space. I waited for Jack or ground control to tell me when to pull the ring to release the parachute, but the little radio was silent. I suddenly realized that the radio wasn't working. Because we were talking so much about the weather, I had forgotten to check the batteries on the transceiver in my helmet. Momentary panic! My mind raced. Because the wind could blow me far from the safe landing area, I delayed pulling the chute for about 40 seconds. I knew, though, what a dangerous situation I was in. It was impossible for me to tell how far above the ground I was. Also, Jack had warned me about trees and high-tension wires not far from the landing field. Without my knowing when to bend my knees to take up the shock of landing, and guessing that the wind was taking me away from the safe landing area, I realized that I might even be killed. If the radio in my helmet had been working, Jack or ground control could have helped guide me away from danger. By pulling the ropes of the harness in certain ways, a parachutist can alter his course and compensate for drift. The strangest thing about my predicament was that I wasn't frightened. I thought of Patty. Perhaps that was the reason. Often, in times of great danger, the mind works more efficiently. The most important thing is to avoid panic. Panic seems to paralyze rational action. You often hear of people caught in a burning building doing crazy things like jumping from a third-story window when, if they had remained calm, they could have saved themselves from serious injury or even death. Of course, I couldn't do very much as I swung about under my parachute except relax and pray a little. But I was alert for the shock of landing whenever it happened. One firm decision I came to as I drifted downward was that if I survived the jump, I would fly to Arizona. I would tell Patty how much I loved her and that more than anything else in the world, I wanted to marry her and take care of her for the rest of our lives. I had just made a sort of vow to that effect when suddenly I crashed. Pain shot through my right arm and my ribs. There was a sound of ripping cloth and snapping branches. I had landed on a tree. For a few seconds, the cords of the chute wrapped around a branch, and I was poised 30 feet above the ground. Then the branch snapped, and I fell the rest of the way. It was a hard landing. I knew I had a broken arm, but I was quite conscious. At least I was alive. When Jack and some friends arrived to help me, they asked me why my fingernails were bleeding. It was only then that I remembered how I had dug my fingers into the frozen ground because I was so glad to be back on Earth and alive. My broken arm was set and put in a plaster cast. My broken ribs were strapped and my scratches were cleaned. Within a few days, I was hobbling about again, and within a month, I was ready to fly to Arizona. I had wired Patty that I was coming. When I got off the plane, there were many people milling all around me, but above the noise I could distinguish running feet. I would know those footsteps anywhere. A moment later, Patty ran into my arms. My white cane and suitcase were knocked out of my hands. I lifted her off her feet and we just spun around in a sort of dance. I guess everyone was looking at us, but that didn't matter. I could feel Patty's cheeks were wet with tears. Then she whispered into my ear, "You see, Tom, what happens when you have faith? I knew we would meet again." Patty's parents and brothers were worried by the thought of Patty's marrying a blind man. Like so many people, they believed that a blind person was a helpless invalid. Somehow, I had to prove differently. "Okay," I said to her 3 brothers, "let's have a game of yard basketball." "But you can't play basketball," said Joe, Patty's youngest brother. "Why don't you find out?" I replied. I asked Patty to stand underneath the basket and to call out every time I got the ball. We played a really hard game, but with Patty shouting, "Shoot, Tom, shoot!" I shot twice as many baskets as Joe. Then the next day we went riding in the foothills, and after that we played golf. None of them wanted to take me on at wrestling. Anyway, Patty's brother soon understood that I wasn't exactly a helpless invalid. But Mr. Stefan, Patty's father, was another matter. He was harder to convince. I found him alone in his office and went in. "Good morning, Mr. Stefan," I said cheerfully. "You know that Patty and I want to get married, and I know that you are not at all happy about our plans." "No, I'm not," replied Mr. Stefan gruffly. "Why?" I asked. "You know why," he said. "She's my very dear and only daughter, and I think it's unfair of you to ask her to marry you. Suppose you have children. Perhaps they will be blind like you." "Oh, no," I protested. "You're quite wrong, sir. My blindness was caused by an accident in the hospital where I was born. It is not a hereditary defect at all. If we should have children, they will be as clear-sighted as Patty." "All right," said Mr. Stefan. "I'm glad to hear that. But how are you going to support Patty? It's hard enough for a sighted person to make his way in the world." "I've just been offered a job as an entertainer at $1,000 a week," I said, "and a big record company wants me to make an album." Mr. Stefan was surprised. Then he said, "I suppose that many people like me think of blind people as being helpless and dependent. You sound to me as if you're going to be a millionaire." "Yes, I think I am," I said confidently. "But you haven't asked me the most important question." "What's that?" he asked. "If I love your daughter," I said. "Well, do you?" "I love Patty so much that I would give my life for her," I answered. Mr. Stefan blew his nose very hard. Then he asked, "Have you set the wedding date?" That night at a happy family dinner, we decided on a spring wedding. I guess most stories would end at this point. The last line usually reads, "And so we lived happily ever after." But after our wonderful wedding, I felt that our story was not ending at all. In fact, I felt that it was just beginning. Besides, it couldn't end until you'd met Heidi and Blythe. Heidi is a German shepherd. She's not just a family pet. She is a seeing eye dog. My seeing eye dog. She once saved my life. Blythe is our little daughter. She's blonde and lovely like her mother. And I once saved her life.